Today we are going to be covering how to launch a Amazon Web Services EC2 instance from PowerShell. To get started, you will first want to make sure that you have the AWS tools installed for PowerShell. You can verify that you have that package installed by going and using git module, and then a flag of hash list, and we are going to say star AWS star. So if we run that now, we will get a return showing that we have the tools installed. You should just see one version. I have two versions installed currently. So now that you have verified that you have the tools in place, you'll need to make sure you have your AWS credentials set up. So to see if you've set that up before, you can run git AWS credential. And then you can do a dash list profile detail. And you'll see here that we have two profiles called default, and one of them is stored in a local directory for me. So that verifies that we have those credentials. If you do not have credentials listed, you will need to make sure that you add your credentials to your PowerShell instance. Next step will be to initialize the AWS default configuration. And as you'll see from our last command that we ran, our profile name is default. So we're going to do a flag of profile name, and we are going to say default. So that will just initialize our account for use in our session here. Make sure my spelling was good. Great. So I had a misspelling there, but just once you run that, you should just see no return, but you shouldn't see any errors. That is what you will want to see. So next thing you will want to do here is add a command, and this command is going to launch our EC2 instance. So we're going to get started with building that command by typing new -EC2 instance, all is one word, and then we're going to space and then add a flag of ImageId, and you can find different AMIs on AWS. So what I am currently going to insert is one for Linux. You can look up other numbers if you would like to launch a Windows instance or a different flavor of Linux. So feel free to look up those other AMI numbers and enter whatever ID for whatever image you would like on your EC2 instance. And then we are going to add a MinCount as our next option here. This will set how many EC2 instances we want at a minimum. And then we'll set a MaxCount, which is just the opposite. We want a minimum of one, we want a maximum of one, and that will ensure that we get one server spun up. Then if we say KeyName, if you have a set of, or a keypair set up within AWS, you can use an existing one by typing in the keypair here. So I have a keypair called Linux keypair that is on my device and is saved and is also in the EC2 instance availability on AWS. So you may need to set up your own keypair if you do not have one existing within AWS, and then you can just use that keypair via the command line after that. And we're going to add -SecurityGroupId, and then from here you're going to look up your security group that you use to run your EC2 instances. It's going to be a different number than you see here for mine, but feel free to just follow along as you would like. I will imagine that your instance will not work with my security group, but you can give it a try. I would recommend that you set up a security group and use your security group ID, so that way this will function for you. So you're going to need to select your choice on the security group ID. And then our next item here is the instance type. And so for sake of this demo, we are going to run a T2 micro instance. And that will just give us a very generic small server for sake of this demonstration. You can set up whatever instance type you would like for this. So if you need to set up lots of servers, or if you need to set up some form of a VDI solution, this is an option for you to adjust that as needed. And then we are going to add a SubnetID. Once again, this is going to be specific to your virtual private cloud, so please look up those details within your instance and enter them and change them. So just to review that again, we have a command of new EC2 instance, the image ID, this is just a Linux image, min and max count to tell us how many servers we want spun up in EC2, the key name, so that gives us our key pair. You will need to adjust this variable for your key pair unless you also have one called Linux key pair. SecurityGroupId is going to be unique to your VPC, so please look up your own SecurityGroupId and apply it here. Instance type you can change if you would like to. I am running T2 Micro just since it is simple for this tutorial. And then our SubnetID is going to also be specific to your VPC, so you will need to adjust this variable. So you'll adjust SubnetID, SecurityGroupId, and your key pair. You can keep everything else the same if you would like to. So now, if we run this command, it'll take a moment, but what we should see is this little pop-up right here. So it'll say group names, groups, instances, owners, requesters, etc. So if we now hop over to our EC2 console, I'm going to refresh it. And you'll notice here that we now have a T2 micro instance loading up with the Linux key pair. So that is currently pulling in that image and getting the EC2 instance set up from PowerShell. And while it's great that we can launch an EC2 instance, what if I needed to launch more? You can simply do that by adjusting these values for max and min. So let's adjust these to 2. I'll click run again. If we click refresh, you'll notice we have 2 more instances starting to launch now. So that's great. Now I have EC2 instances running, and I'm hoping to get them shut down because I don't want to keep these instances running long term. So if that is the case for you, once again, you could use the console, but for sake of this, we're learning how to interact with our EC2 instance with PowerShell. So let's add in a command here that will terminate our EC2 instances. So if we go here and say get an EC2 instance, you will notice that it kicks back our EC2 instances. So then now let's run the same command, but we're going to put it in parentheses and do .instances. So now we're seeing all of the instances as well as the VPC ID. So if we now pipe this into a get member type and property. This will show us all the different properties that we have for these different EC2 instances. So after having run that command, you can see that we have the option to grab the instance ID. So now what I am going to do is do a select instance ID. So now we are returning all of our instance IDs. So we can now say for each, so it's a one word for each object. We're going to run remove -EC2 instance. And we're going to run with the variable here and say that we're wanting to grab the instance ID. So let's run that and see if my syntax checks out. So it's asking, are we sure we actually want to terminate the instances? Let's say no for a second to all of these. And let's change the command here. So if you had 100 instances of EC2, you wouldn't want to have to click command. And maybe you're running this in a non-GUI format. So you might be running it on some form of just non-GUI server. So let's add the flag here for force. So if we run that now, you shouldn't get any prompt for that. Just says current state and instance IDs and previous instance state. So if we go back over to EC2 now and refresh, all of our instances are now shutting down. So that is how you can first set up an EC2 instance using PowerShell, and how you can then terminate those EC2 instances once they are set up. Hope this helps you. Have a fantastic day, and please comment, like, and subscribe on the video.